I want to talk about the Book of Mormon, and I want to talk about it from an unusual perspective, which is sort of inside out. I've been interested for a long time in the question, what must be true in order for the Book of Mormon text to make sense? Or more specifically, what must Nephi know? What is the mental furniture inside Nephi's head necessary to make what he writes make the most sense? What he writes and also what he includes from other people, whether it's Jacob or Isaiah. And I, as a novelist, this is kind of a funny confession. I went about 13 years without reading a piece of fiction, right? I read from beginning of my mission until 5 years into being a practicing lawyer. I read just a ton of history and archaeology and language, and I became pretty convinced, most of this stuff written by Gentiles, that somehow the key to what is in the Book of Mormon is the temple. Convinced for two reasons, really. The first is that I think Nephi actually says so. So Nephi in 1 Nephi 9 and again in 1 Nephi 19 talks about why he writes the small plates, and he says very similar things. First of all, he says to make an account of our ministry, or later the more plain and precious parts of our ministries and prophecies.
Just a note for everybody. I'm assuming we will get these slides and we'll distribute.
You can have the slides freely, absolutely.
Write down like any of your sources and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to worry about that. So
yeah,
the slides will come.
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. Now this is modestly provocative. The word ministry only appears 4 times in the King James Old Testament. Twice it translates the word hand, yod. So the Old Testament says such and such was done by the hand of somebody, and the King James translator said by the ministry of Bob this happened. Okay, but the other 2 times it occurs, I think it's in Numbers chapter 4. It translates the word sharet, which is a word that means liturgy. It's the work of the priest in the temple and the tools that relate to that. So that there is modestly provocative. The word wise, Nephi says in both chapters, there are wise purposes that he does not know, for which the Lord has made him, told him to make this record. The word wise is more provocative. We're going to talk about it today. We'll talk about it again tomorrow. Wise in some texts appears to be a title one has bestowed upon one. We'll see this tonight in the temple. Wisdom in some texts, we'll look at this tomorrow, looks like a stand-in for a divine person, and specifically a female divine person. And so it's interesting that he says, for a wise purpose. But the most provocative verse is the first one, because Nephi opens his account as we have it, saying, why did I write this book? I have known the goodness and the mysteries of God. Therefore, I wrote the book. Now, mysteries is a word that we have forgotten how to read. It has nothing to do with Edgar Allan Poe. Mysterion was a secret and sacred piece of liturgical drama. Okay, a sacred rite. A mustes, the source of our word mystic, was somebody who participated in such an ordinance. So and by the way, this word appears about 20 times in the Book of Mormon. Okay, and certainly most and maybe all of those times, it seems to refer, in fact, to secret and sacred ordinances and the knowledge communicated in secret, sacred ordinances. And I think actually, and I've thought for a long time, this has got to be what 1 Nephi 1 is telling us. In other words, I, Nephi, am a temple man. I have secret, sacred knowledge. That's why I wrote the book. Which would suggest that probably then the content of the book should reflect that. So that's one reason why I've long thought the temple somehow is the key to the Book of Mormon. The second reason is the prevalence, the repetition over and over again of the image of the tree in the Book of Mormon. So 1 Nephi 8 we're going to look at today, but also some of Alma's speeches. Alma 32 is a great one, and also, of course, Jacob 5, right? And then, of course, the sermon at the temple. We see the tree over and over again. And the tree is an old temple symbol. There's a tree in according to the written accounts, there's a tree in Solomon's temple. This is the description from Exodus 37. There's a very similar description in Exodus 28 of the menorah. Now the text says this is the menorah as it was made for the tabernacle. Some scholars think that the description of the tabernacle is really a description of what Solomon's temple was being retrojected back in time. I'm going to conflate the tabernacle and the two temple accounts. They're similar enough for today's purposes. The differences mostly don't matter. Okay? This is the description of the menorah. Now it's a lamp, right? And it has a central stem and then 3 branches on each side. So it's got seven branches. And I'm not going to read this. All I'm going to do is highlight all of the tree words. Right? The temple, the menorah, the lamp in the temple is a tree, and it's not just any tree, it's a flowering tree. It's got fruit and flowers. And it's described as such, it's described with that language. Now there's a lot written on the menorah. It's been said it's the tree of life. I think that's true. We're going to see that today and tomorrow. Also that the 7 lamps refer to the 7 visible planets in ancient cosmology. I think that's probably true too. We're not going to talk about it. It's one of the roads we won't take, right? Or that the lamp is the cosmic axis rooted in the foundation stone. We won't talk about that. But I for these 2 reasons, for a long time thought the temple was somehow at the heart of the Book of Mormon. And then when I lived in Eagle, Idaho, in fact, just up the road from Boise, I got called to teach in the Elders Quorum about 11, 12 years ago. And I have sort of a deep-rooted aversion to our manuals and really to manuals in general. So when it came time to teach, I said, okay, I'm going to teach this. I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to talk about the Book of Mormon, the temple. And I've been teaching about that for 10 years since. So let's talk first of all about the context around the menorah. We're going to go through this scheme kind of 3 different times today. So this is a description of just the core piece, just the basic part of the temple in Jerusalem. I built from 1 Kings 6 and 7, 2 Chronicles 3 and 4. They don't agree on all details, but for us, for today, they're close enough. And also Exodus talking about the tabernacle. Okay? The temple has 3 rooms. There's more. There's like storage rooms around the side. Okay? They don't matter. For today, it has 3 rooms. Let's walk through them. The first has a name, which is the Ulam. It's got 2 pillars. And then Kings and Chronicles differ as to its description. Chronicles seems to say it's extraordinarily tall. So if you see those reproduction images of the temple, and it looks like it has a tower on the front, that's because they took the Chronicles account seriously. Kings seems to imply that it has no roof, which is why sometimes translations call it the porch. Okay? The first room is maybe open to the sky, maybe very tall, the Ulam. The second room...
Dave, we want you to stay this way.
You want me to be in the film? Okay, I will stop pacing, sorry. This is going to be hard for me. Okay, I'm used to roaming a class full of people. Okay, but I take that counsel, thank you. So translations call this sometimes the outer house. Sometimes current translations call this the nave. The nave is the long room along the axis in a traditional Christian church, right? This is the nave of the temple. It has a specific name in Hebrew, which is the Heikal, which is a very, very old word. Because before it was a Hebrew word, it was an Akkadian word, which is a language that goes back 1,000 years before Hebrew. And it was the Akal or the Akalum. And before that, it was actually 2 words, 2 Sumerian words, A-Gal. The A-Gal, and this is as far back as you can go in written human language. We don't know before Sumerian, Egyptian, that's it. That's the bounds of how far we can see. The A-Gal was where the Lugal lived. Okay, the A-Gal was the big house. The Lugal was the big man. So any palace or any large building, any temple was a Heikal, was an A-Gal. The king, the Lugal, lived there or owned that space. That word came all the way down into Hebrew as Heikal, which is the name of the nave, but also is used to refer to the whole building. Okay, any big building is a Heikal. Now there's furniture in here, right? there's an incense altar. Hey, we just started reading the New Testament, right? What happens in here in Luke chapter 1? We all read this like this week.
We had a work conference.
Zachariah.
Oh, very good. Yeah. This is where Zachariah sees the angel Gabriel, right? And we'll come back to that. He sees him to the right of the incense altar. There's an altar out here. You burn incense on it. The reason Zachariah is in the temple is because it's his job that day to go burn incense. And he sees standing to the right of the temple, to the right of the altar. He sees the angel Gabriel. There are also tables and lamps. I write it this way because Kings Chronicles and Exodus differ as to how many. Okay, it's 1 or it's 10 or it's unspecified sum. If in fact Exodus is a retrojection of the Temple of Solomon, there's a lamp and there's a table. Okay, maybe there's more. For today, it doesn't matter. Okay, lamps and tables. On the table, there is bread. There are also vessels, and we have no idea what they did with the vessels. So there are shovels and vessels and scoops, I think. And Menachem Haran, in his book on Solomon's temple, says this is a good reminder for us that we know a lot about what was done outside the building and very little about what was done inside the building and why they had vessels sitting here. Now they had bread. What is the bread they have sitting on the temple there? On the table. Yeah, it's a shewbread. It's the bread of the prayer. Yes, I've given away the answer up here. Yeah, Leviticus. Yeah, good. I'm glad. Keeping you engaged. Yeah, so there's bread in here which is spiked with frankincense, and apparently eaten here by priests according to Leviticus 24. Now there's a second account of there being bread in the temple, which is manna, right? Manna, which literally means whatchamacallit. In Hebrew, that's what manna is. So Exodus 16 describes manna, says they put a pot of it before the Lord, which means somewhere in the temple. Hebrews 9 in the New Testament says they had a pot inside the ark. In other words, the ark is not just full of the tables of the law. We have Aaron's budding staff, and we have a pot of manna. So there's bread here. Now the showbread is interesting. It's flavored with frankincense. I've not tasted frankincense. Has anyone tasted frankincense? What does it taste like?
It just tastes like frankincense.
So I've read that it's sort of citrusy.
Yeah, it is. It's strong. I have the oil,
Oh yeah. Okay, so you get a kind of a flavored bread here. Manna tastes like honey. It said that manna tastes like honey. It's white and as white as white and tastes like honey. Interestingly, by the way, we'll come back to this. Jesus seems to identify himself with both of those at various times. John chapter 6, he says, "I am the bread of heaven." Right? This is the bread of heaven up here. I am manna. And then in Luke, so the Leviticus 24 describes the bread, the eating of the bread as a memorial. As a memorial, as a kind of sacrifice. And what does Jesus say in Luke when he's breaking the bread up for his disciples? Yeah, eat this in remembrance of me, right? So as Jesus seems to identify himself with his bread. We'll come back to that. All right, so that's the big middle room. The back room, the debir, I keep wanting to move away. I'm not going to. Is a cube, 20 by 20 cubits. By the way, that makes it shorter than the other rooms, which probably means there's a staircase up leading to this back room. Maybe not. Maybe the roof comes down, but probably the staircase goes up. One reason why that would, or one sort of piece of consistency that creates, is that in Hebrew linguistically, you don't go to or from the temple. You can, when you're traveling sort of neutrally around space, you say, "I walk." Okay, but if we here turn and begin to travel towards Jerusalem, we don't walk, we ascend. And if we arrive in Israel and then go towards Jerusalem, we ascend to Jerusalem, and then we ascend on the Temple Mount, and we ascend up. And this is, in the language, the highest point on earth. And you descend, they're different verbs. You descend to come back down. So stairs up seems consistent, seems right. Now, there's an interesting geological feature here. There is a rock There's a boulder that protrudes up through the floor. It's still there. It's just not in a temple anymore, right? It's in the mosque, the Dome of the Rock. This rock is so important, it has its own Wikipedia page. So if you look up foundation stone, you can see it. There are pictures of it. It's a piece of the bedrock that juts up and is visible. And the ark apparently rested on the stone and was so closely associated with the stone that by the time, once the ark was gone, they just treated the stone like it was the ark. So if you read in the Mishnah, which is about 2nd century BC Jewish writings, AD, 2nd century AD Jewish writings, after the time of Christ, talking about what they did in the temple in the time of Christ, the Day of Atonement ceremonies, which 1,000 years earlier they had sprinkled blood on the ark, in Jesus' time they were sprinkling on the rock. They treated the rock like it was the ark. It was what the ark had rested on. There is also, this is kind of fun, there's a cave under that rock. There's a cave. No archaeology has been done on it, but the Knights Templar held it in the Middle Ages. There are photos of it because people do go in there, just not non-Muslims. Okay, and that cave is called the Well of Souls. The Well of Souls is the name of the cave under that rock. Now, interestingly, in many of the visionary or literary accounts of the Holy of Holies, we're going to see some of these, there's water in the Holy of Holies, some kind of water. Now, it's thought possibly one use to which this cave has been put is a cistern. So maybe it was the case that there was a well beneath the Holy of Holies. That's also interesting. It creates kind of a nice consistency with some old Jewish myths whereby the waters of the flood were corked shut by the placement of the foundation stone. So if that was the story you heard and you went and you saw, oh, there's water below the stone, that would sort of, it fits. I don't know if it's right, but there's a cave there, and in the visionary accounts, there's water in the Holy of Holies. The name, by the way. So the Hebrew word for word is davar. Dabir is the same root. Hebrew conjugates things by shifting the vowels inside. Okay? So it means the place of speech, the place of the oracle, the place where God would speak is the Dabir. It's also called the Holy of Holies, right? And of course, with the ark, you've got cherubim. Maybe you've got two, so the description of the ark itself has cherubim on the cover. Maybe those are the cherubim that are meant, but they're described as if they're standing beside it as statues. So maybe there are 4, maybe there are 2. We don't know. They're cherubim. By the way, we read the word cherubim, and thanks to Italian painters, we think little naked fat babies, right? But that's not the description. Whenever they're described, you have strange monsters, right? With multiple faces and 6 wings and things like that. All right, so look, that for today's purpose, that suffices as a description of Solomon's temple as described in the Old Testament. Now, when I went and started teaching for the first time in Elders Quorum, the case I made was 1 Nephi 8 shows a journey forward through these 3 rooms. It's an ordinance, and it maps out against these 3 rooms. So grab your Books of Mormon, and we're going to read some of this. Whoops, but I've jumped ahead too far.
Pencil or pen anywhere?
Yeah, right there on the tray.
Oh, okay. So the account is a little not straightforward to read in that Lehi arrives on the scene, moves forward, gets to the end, and then looks backwards and tells how other people move forward along this journey. But let's kind of break out the pieces. You guys willing to read? Do some reading? Okay. All right. Vern? Okay. 1 Nephi 8, verses 9 and then 19 and 20.
And it came to pass, after I had prayed unto the Lord, I beheld a large and spacious field. Number 19.
Yep.
And I beheld a rod of iron and extended along the bank of the river and led to the tree by which I stood. And I also beheld a straight and narrow path, which came along by the rod of iron, even to the tree by which I stood. And it also led by the head of the fountain unto a large and spacious field, as if it had been a world.
Okay. So it's not 100% clear, but the way this is usually interpreted, and I think that's right, is look, you've got a path, and at one end is the tree, and at the other end is a large and spacious field, as if it had been a world. Right? This is say the beginning of the journey. In fact, verse 21, I saw numberless concourses of people pressing forward to get onto the path. Suggests that the beginning of the journey is in the large and spacious field, as if it had been a world. So let me make kind of 2 points. First of all, if we are describing a journey from the outside to the center of the temple, and this is a roofless porch, then calling it a field is a pretty good description. And spacious, right? If this is just the open temple yard, that's a spacious field. Secondly, the twice saying as if it had been a world is a fascinating pinpoint. Okay, it's an identifier. So here's what I mean. The name of this room given in Kings and Chronicles is the Ulam. Okay, the porch, the first room, the Ulam. World in Hebrew is olam. Now, how close are they? Well, this U and this O are actually the same letter. They're a vav. The difference is between an aleph and an ayin. In modern Hebrew, those are pronounced identically. In ancient Hebrew, they're a slightly different version of glottal stops. This is a fiercer glottal stop. The glottal stop is the sound at the beginning of the word apple, like before the A, right? Say apple, your throat's doing this, That's the glottal stop. So it's the difference between and, right? That's the difference between these words.
I don't think the camera caught that.
Let me try that again. There's apple and apple, right? That's the difference we're talking about. It is a small one. That's interesting. That suggests that maybe, in fact, Lehi is calling out this, or Nephi, who's writing this down. We really only have Nephi's writing. Is calling the room out by name. Let's look at what happens with the rest of the journey. So verses 21 through 27. Allison, would you read those? That's a lot. That's a lot. We could split it in half if it's too much.
I can do it.
Okay, I have confidence.
21 through 27.
Yes, this is the meat of it.
Numberless courses of people. Concourses. What did I say?
Courses.
Okay. Many of whom were pressing forward, that they might obtain the path which led unto the tree by which I stood. And it came to pass that they did come forth and commence in the path which led to the tree. And it came to pass that there arose a mist of darkness, yea, even an exceedingly great mist of darkness, insomuch that they who had commenced in the path did lose their way, that they wandered off and were lost. And it came to pass that I beheld others pressing forward, and they came forth and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron, and they did press forward through the mist of darkness, clinging to the rod of iron, even until they did come forth and partake of the fruit of the tree. And after they had partaken of the fruit of the tree, they did cast their eyes about as if they were ashamed. And I also cast my eyes round about, and behold, on the other side of the river of water, a great and spacious building, and it stood as it were in the air, high above the earth. And it was filled with people, both old and young, both male and female, and their manner of dress was exceedingly fine. And they were in the attitude of mocking, and pointing their fingers towards those who had come at and were partaking of the fruit.
Excellent. Thank you.
Let me just note one thing there,
Yeah.
because this actually might go back to some of your.
Yeah, please do.
The original manuscript, I've got to just.
You got some notes? Ooh, excellent.
Got something scratched out, about 27, where it says who had come at and were
Oh, fascinating.
That's why I mentioned that.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so
Hey.
up should be instead of at.
You just scored points. So let's look at some other features. If this is a description of a journey that is modeled on, or in some sense set in, the nave, we got mists of darkness. Well, the prominent piece of furniture in the center of a nave is an incense temple, right, which could generate mists of darkness. The very name Hekal means a large, spacious building. And Nephi says, there is a great and spacious building. And by the way, it was high above the earth, which is exactly what happens linguistically in Hebrew, is you ascend up to the Hekal, right? This is the field as it was the world. High above the earth is the great and spacious building, the Hekal. Now, they get people with fine clothing, fine clothing. If we go look at Exodus, the word fine in the King James translation occurs repeatedly in reference to things made for use in the tabernacle, including in particular clothing made for the use of Aaron and his sons in officiating in the temple, which is described as being made of fine linen and fine twine linen repeatedly. They are the people who wear fine clothing in the Old Testament, is the priests. All of which tends to suggest, this is where the center part of the journey is playing out. And again, it looks like Lehi has given us even a call out on the name. Okay, this is the Hekal. This is the great and spacious building. Now, kind of worth talking about. This seems like a really gloomy, dark way to see the temple, doesn't it? I think that's why people haven't realized that this is a vision of the temple. Why would Lehi see this? Why would he set such a gloomy vision here?
I know.
Ooh, parts have been lost. We're going to come back and talk about that. Yeah. First Nephi 1, right, opens up, I don't mean the verse, but the first chapter, people are trying to kill Lehi, right? Lehi is in a persecuted religious minority, and he identifies himself with Jeremiah, and he identifies himself with the prophets, and we're going to see Nephi identifies them with Isaiah, and they accept from grumbling Laman and Lemuel the tag of visionary men. Right? Lehi says, yes, it's true. I know I'm a visionary man. Right? Lehi is the minority party. The Jews who are at Jerusalem, which is to say members of the tribe of Judah, which is the royal tribe, Jerusalem being the royal city, that tribe controlling the temple and the palace and the law enforcement and all the administration, that's who his enemies are. So Lehi, the physical building of the temple as he knows it, is in enemy hands, right? This is in the hands of people who are persecuting him. I think that's why we get such a dark vision here. All right, so if I'm right, then we must have a third stage. So we're going to kind of jump around a bit here. Deanna, if you could read verse 15 and then verse 20 for me.
We still on 8?
We're still on 1 Nephi 8.
And it came to pass that I beckoned unto them, and I also did say unto them with a loud voice that they should come unto me and partake of the fruit, which was desirable above all other fruit.
Yep.
And I also beheld a straight and narrow path which came along by the rod of iron, even to the tree by which I stood. And it also led by the head of the fountain unto a large and spacious field, as if it had been a world.
We've kind of jumped back in the account here. Two things. One, the name of this room is the Debir, which is the place of speech, the place where God utters his davar, his word. Okay? Lehi says, I called out to them with a loud voice. So if this were an account of an actual ordinance, he's calling through the veil encouragements to Laman and Lemuel. Straight and narrow path. Now, what exactly is here? We're not sure. Likely stairs, either a door or a curtain, depending on whether you follow Kings or Chronicles, or some combination. The Mishnah, Tractate Yoma, says there are two veils and they don't come together, they overlap. So you have to walk in at one end, and then you turn and walk down. I think it says it's 1 cubit wide, so it's like this, right? You walk down and then turn. There's a straight and narrow path suggests some opening like that, a door, a veil, a corridor. All right, verse 13. Doug, can you read 13 and then 10, 11, and 16 for us?
13. And I cast my eyes around about, and perhaps I might discover my family also. I beheld a river of water, and it ran along, and it was near the tree of which I was partaking of the fruit. And 10.
Yeah, then 10 to 11.
And it came to pass that I beheld a tree whose fruit was desirable to make one happy. And it came to pass that I did go forth and partake of the fruit thereof. And I beheld that it was most sweet, above all that I ever before tasted. Yea, and I beheld that the fruit thereof was white, to exceed all the whiteness that I have ever seen. And 16.
Very good.
And it came to pass that they did come unto me and partake of the fruit also.
Okay. So behind, if I'm right, if the straight and narrow path is an entry through the veil here, then he sees behind the veil a tree, at which there are waters, right? There is fruit which is white and sweet, which matches the description of manna, and less well maybe also might be frankincense spiked bread. I don't know. Oh, very good. Hold on a sec, though. I'm going to come back to that, okay? In fact, I think that's my next animation. Yes, hold on. I want to get some other point first. And I haven't had you read, had I? Skipped right over you.
I was happy that you said
I'm going to have you read 2 really good verses, though. Here, read. Well, first of all, tell us, maybe you know off the top of your head, 1 Nephi 11:25 identifies the iron rod. There's an iron rod here along the path. Right, there's an iron rod. 1 Nephi 11:25 identifies the iron rod. What does it say the iron rod is? It's the word of God. The iron rod. Yeah, the iron rod is the word of God. Very good. Now, here's your reading, Dennis. Chapter 8, verses 24, and then verses 30. Okay, and here's what I want you to tell me. Okay, how many times must you grasp the iron rod?
They came to pass that I beheld others pressing forward. And they came forth and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron. And they did press forward through the mist of darkness, clinging to the rod of iron, even until they did come forth and partake of the fruit of the tree.
So that's 24. Two verbs of holding on to the rod, right? Now verse 30.
Verse 30. But, to be short in riding, behold, he saw other multitudes pressing forward. And they came and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron, and they did press their way forward, continually holding fast to the rod of iron, until they came forth and fell down and partook of the fruit of the tree.
So there's 2 more, right? Caught hold, held fast. So look, the rod of iron appears to be something that is located in the straight and narrow path, which you must hold on to or grasp 4 times before you can enter into the presence of the tree. Now, there's a weird point here, right? There's an ambiguity, which Dennis already identified, which is wait a minute, the tree and the bread are up here, aren't they? According to the Kings and Chronicles account and my previous slide. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Now let's come back to that. We'll come back to both those points. One of them later today, one of them tomorrow. Okay. There's an ambiguity. So look, this was kind of where I started. I said I think First Nephi 8 is a journey, shows a journey forward through the temple into the presence of the tree of life. And then I encountered Jack Welch's second most famous work. What's his first most famous work? Not the tax law stuff. No one cares about that. He's chiasmus guy. Yeah. He's something else guy too. What's the something else?
There's a lot of things, but Zosimos comes to mind for me. But
all right, very good.
Zosimos,
I think what ought to be his best known discovery is he wrote a couple of books about the Sermon on the Mount. And he wrote one for farms, and then he sort of Gentilized it, which it got really baffled reviews because no one knew what he was talking about.
The editorial of that compilation book, so there were a lot of...
He's done other stuff too. I'm not trying to denigrate Jack.
The Sermon on the Mount,
Yeah.
There's another book.
He's done various things.
Okay.
Okay. In which Jack claims that the Sermon on the Mount is an ordinance. And I think he's right. In fact, I think it's the same ordinance that we just saw in 1 Nephi 8. So we're going to walk through the Sermon on the Mount together and read it as an ordinance. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. It's also in 3 Nephi. I'm going to look at Matthew. They're not exactly the same. The advantage of reading Matthew is I know enough Greek that I can see interesting stuff, and I can't see that in the Nephite account. Hey, look, there are 3 chapters. There are 3 rooms in this sequence of rooms. Let's walk through the hypothesis that maybe each of these chapters belongs to or describes the action in a room. All right, so where did we get to read? We got to Doug in it's William?
Yeah, Will, yeah.
Will. Matthew chapter 5.
The first chapter, the Sermon on the Mount.
No, not the whole thing. That would be awesome. But just read the first 2 verses for the moment.
5, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. He opened his mouth and taught them, saying.
Okay. So this is an event, an experience that happens on a mountain, and you have to go up to it. Now Jesus sits. Okay. Well, it turns out that in Hebrew, the same verb can mean to sit or to dwell. So Jesus is the person sitting on the mountain or dwelling on the mountain. Either way, we seem to have an allusion to God who sits on his throne, the ark, on the Temple Mount. Okay? This is the ordinance of approaching the person who sits or dwells on the mountain. Now, if you'd read the Beatitudes for us too, Will, that's 3 through 12.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. And rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you.
All right. So we have something that may be like entrance qualifications, maybe, but we have 9, if you count them, 9 beatitude statements, 9 blessed are, and 7 promised blessings. Because 2 of the beatitudes, there's a repetition, and then one of the beatitudes, the kingdom of heaven is twice, right? And then the last beatitude doesn't have an actual blessing. So we got 7 blessings, we got 9 beatitude statements. We're going to come back to both of those points. Oh, shoot, I'm so sorry. Remind me your name. Julie, I'm an idiot. Your turkey soup was delicious. Chowder. Julie, can you read verse 13 for us? And we'll read 14 and 16 too, but 13 first.
Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? Is it thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men?
So, look, we're at the beginning of a 3-room ordinance going into the temple. What we're going to see is that this is an ordinance where you are taught some moral laws, and you appear to be asked to make covenants in this ordinance. What's this verse? This is the covenant penalty, right? This is it. You're cast out and trodden underfoot. Now, we won't look at it today, but look at this on your own. Go read Alma chapter 30, the story of Korihor. Korihor says, he says, hey, an angel came and told me there was no God, and all of your father's teachings is foolishness. Korihor's punishment is to die the covenant penalty. He is cast out and he is trodden underfoot to death. Okay, that's how Korihor dies. That is not a story of a secular intellectual. It is a story of a temple apostate, marked by his covenant penalty death. All right, verses 14 to 16.
Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on an hill cannot be hid. 14 and 16.
14, 15, and 16.
Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works, and glorify your Father which is in heaven.
So this passage has got some real resonance. First of all, the reference to a veiled candle suggests the light into whose presence are going to come, ambiguously where we will see some more information on. Okay, but also the promise is actually that you are going to become light, or the instruction is you need to become light. Now Matthew and Alma both have the sentence, the righteous shine in the kingdom of God. Matthew, where he says it, then notes that this is an esoteric secret by saying, who has ears to hear, let him hear. Okay? The commandment or the promise or the instruction is, hey, you are going to enter into the kingdom of God and you will shine, right? Which seems to imply this is about the ordinance of becoming like God, of becoming someone who can live in the kingdom of God. It's God who shines. I like that. Okay, verse 17 to 18. Read that for us too, if you would.
Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled.
So, two verses about the law, right? And this is interesting. Now, if you look at my little diagram down here, and you may have already guessed that I stole these from restroom icons on the internet, okay? But they work. So I've suggested, hey, we don't know who goes to the ordinance. Here's a woman and a man, okay? But an ordinance that of any complexity at all requires some kind of officiant, right? Someone baptizes you, someone confers the authority on you. So there's someone taking them through the ordinance here. Now there are various points, there are hints in this text and in other texts that connect this with a sequence of three figures, a sequence of three priests. And that sequence is, at least as captured here, is Moses and Elijah and the Lord. This seems to be a reference to Moses. Where else do you see them? Malachi 4 says, remember Moses, I will send you Elijah, then the day of the Lord will come. The Mount of Transfiguration, up on a mount where people shine, right? And where Peter asks, hey Lord, they see Jesus and he's with Moses and Elijah. And Peter says, can we make 3 tents for you? Tabernacles. Well, the tent is another way to talk about the temple. And these individual rooms are sometimes referred to as tents, right? That same sequence, Moses, Elijah, and the Lord. This, I think, suggests that you got people going through the ordinance and the person who is leading them through the first part is Moses. All right. I've just betrayed how terrible I am with names. I've been like 4 hours with Julie and I got her name wrong. Remind me your name.
I'm Kathy. I haven't met you.
Kathy. Oh, well, I'm an idiot. Okay, Kathy. Thank you.
He was baptized on the same day that Vernon and I were.
Oh, fantastic.
Back way back in
In the trailers.
Oh, very exciting.
It was really wonderful. Then we should go back.
Someday. Could you read 19:20 for us, and then we'll read 20, then the others afterwards. But first, those two.
Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, so again, hey, the ordinance You haven't entered yet, because I'm telling you what you have to do before you can enter, but it seems to be orienting you to be prepared to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And what you have to have is righteousness. We're going to see that's one of the components of the name Melchizedek. And there are some reasons that when that word comes up, in many contexts, we should take righteousness as a stand-in for Melchizedek and ideas associated with it. Now, Kathy, if you read verses 21 to 24 for us as well.
Ye have heard that let me try one more time. Ye have heard that it was said of them of old, by them of old, thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire.
2 more.
Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift.
Okay. So there's an invitation to come forward. There's an altar ahead of them somewhere. Okay. There's an invitation to come forward, but first you must reconcile with your brother. Right? Now, Kathy, I'm going to stay with you one more time. Read 25 and 26. I love these verses.
Agree with thine adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence, till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing.
Very good. Now, adversary here, in Greek the word is antidikos. Anti is on the other side. Dikos is a lawsuit. Okay? The antidikos is your plaintiff or your prosecutor. It's the person who comes after you in a lawsuit. There's a Hebrew word that means the person who comes after you in a lawsuit. What is it? It's actually Satan. It's Satan. That's what the word Satan means. Your Satan is your accuser. It's the person who comes after you in a lawsuit. Now look, if this is a drama that we are reading here, okay, and if we've got Moses leading forward some people and he's saying, okay, you qualify to come in, here's the warning for the penalty, and you gotta be, it seems like somebody else shows up, right? Which is to say, it seems like we have an appearance of Satan, or as I have modeled him, Batman. I couldn't find like a monster restroom icon, but I found a Batman one, and I just blacked out the Batman logo. So look, if we're imagining an ordinance here, right, there's another priest who comes forward, and maybe his costume or a mask, or he's holding a staff of office that says, this is Satan, right? This is your accuser. And look at the passage. Satan does not have any power to put you into prison. Satan has an accusation against you. It's the judge who has the power to sentence you, and if the judge does, then the officers will carry out the execution. Satan has no power over you. The accuser is just there to accuse, to make his lawsuit. So he shows up, we get this warning, right? Don't get into the debt of your accuser. All right, Kathy, thank you. Matt, right?
Yes.
See, my brother's name is Matt, and my son's name is Will. That's how I like it. I cheated. All right, verses 27 to 32, if you would read those.
27 to 32, ye have heard that it was said by them of old, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Where we going? 32.
32.
And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery.
Fantastic. Very good. So here we have some teachings. What are the teachings on marriage, divorce, chastity? Okay. keeping a chaste mind. Now, the next verses are provocative. So, Vern, if you would read from me verses 33 to 37.
Again, ye have heard that it hath been said of them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these come of evil.
So look, this is an instruction on how to swear oaths, right? It says, look, you've heard, don't swear all of these oaths over there. When you swear an oath, you just say yes or no. That's it, right? That's the teaching on how to swear oaths. What does the fact that we are now having a teaching on how to swear oaths suggest about the verses that Matt read?
We're agreeing with them or not.
Right. There's not just a teaching on chastity. There's a teaching on marriage and chastity, and now here's how you swear an oath. So that presumably you can swear an oath to, I'm going to abide by those teachings about divorce and keeping a chaste mind. Right?
So what you seem to be saying is that the people who are being taken through are being taught something, and then they're making a covenant about that something.
Yeah, what I'm saying is this seems to be sort of various kinds of preludes. We're telling you where you're going. You're going to become one who shines. You're going to enter into the kingdom. And hey, get ready. You got to be reconciled to your brother before you come to the altar. And then we sort of get into moral teaching. And after our first sustained piece of moral teaching, there is a teaching on oaths. And I think the reasonable reading is that you learn a teaching about, let's call it chastity, right? And then you either you say yay or you say nay. Right? I don't know what happens if you say nay. But I think that's the logic of why you'd have a teaching on how to swear oaths right there. All right, Allison. We've got another moral teaching, maybe kind of a covenant, verses 38 to 47. Oh, I haven't had I'm so sorry. And I know you're Dennis and Diane. Diane, would you read verses 38 to 47? We'll save a very special verse for Dennis.
Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if a man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brother only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so?
Sorry for overlooking you. I'm so tall. It's like you're not there. Okay, thank you. Excellent reading. So there's moral teaching here, right? It's love your enemy. It's turn the other cheek. Something in that space. The fact that this moral teaching seems to have been followed by oath taking suggests maybe now we also have an oath to agree to that moral standard. All right, now Dennis, verse 48 is a fantastic one. If you read that one for us.
Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect.
Okay. Hard standard, right? Two things. One, the words be ye are not a command. The Greek is esista, which is actually future tense. What it says is, you will be. You will be perfect, even as your Father who is in heaven is perfect. It's a very different thing from be perfect. But here's the other thing. The word perfect in the Greek, we have it in, that's the language we have it in, right? It's probably not what Jesus was talking. We have it in Greek. Is teleoi. You will be teleoi, even as your Father in heaven is teleos. Now, what does teleoi mean? It means complete. It means perfect. It also means up to date, you've paid your taxes. But it means initiated. It means initiated. You will be completed in the sense of having undergone initiatory ordinances, even as your Father in heaven has.
Well, makes me think of fullness of joy, which is resurrection and eternal life.
Yeah.
Because you talk about joy, and it's not until you have them joined for good.
Yeah.
Spirit and body.
Yeah.
And because he talks about your whole body going to hell, or your whole body being filled with light in the next chapter, that connotes to me a resurrection after the judgment, or you're resurrected.
Okay. We're definitely going to see stuff on judgment. I like your touching on joy. Because remember, one of Lehi's great teachings about the garden story, 2 Nephi 2, is, hey, Adam and Eve fell, that we could exist. We have joy. And by the way, in 1 Nephi 8, that's the reaction of those who eat the fruit. They enter the presence of the tree of life, eat the fruit, and they have joy. That's the purpose of life right there.
What were the two words? What were the two Greek words that?
So teleoi
Teleoi
is the plural.
The first one, or that's the
And
plural?
teleos is just one person.
Okay. Oh, so it's just the difference between plural and non-plural.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, technically, if you want, they're both nominative plural and nominative singular. Okay, Jesus is probably not speaking Greek, right? If he's doing this with his disciples, he's speaking, maybe it's Aramaic, maybe it's Hebrew, right? If this is a liturgy, maybe he knows it in an older sacred language. What then is the words that he might be saying in Hebrew? Here's my best guess. There are two good words that both mean perfect, can mean perfect in this sense. They get used interchangeably sometimes. Tamim is perfect. By the way, it looks related to the word tam, which is plain. Jacob was a tam, plain man, dwelt in a tent. Abraham was tamim, perfect. The other one is shalem. Now, you know the word shalom, right, as peace, or in modern Hebrew, hi, right? Shalom. It's more than just peace. It's completion, it is wholeness, it is health. And a shalem is an adjective form of that. Someone is complete, is whole, they are shalom. Now, so I think what this is not a commandment at all. I think having come to the end of the first room, your status changes. You become a different kind of person. And that's being signaled with a title, right? You are now one of the shalom, one of the peaceable. So, for your later reference, if you look at Moroni 7, which is a speech given by Mormon, okay? Mormon is talking apparently to a mixed group, because after a few initial words he says, I would speak unto those of you who are the peaceable followers of Christ, right? Some of you are not, but some of you are the Shalem followers of Christ. And then what he says to those people has a bunch of temple overtones. Now, by the way, Martin Luther hated the Sermon on the Mount. He also hated the Epistle of James. He said it made no sense. And he's right as a sermon. If you get up and read this as a sermon, you're just Polonius, but you're sort of an otherworldly, weird Polonius. Because you're not saying save up and pay your tuition. You're saying, hey, turn the other cheek. Hey, right? It's just a string of apparently unconnected advice. Except that it turns out that it kind of looks familiar if you read it like it's the first act of a 3-act ordinance. All right, that's room 1. Room 2. This is where stuff gets really exciting. stuff really starts to happen here. I'm going to stick with you, Dennis, for a minute if I could. Verses 1 through 4, Matthew 6, 1 through 4.
Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly.
That's good. So alms is kind of a funny translation here. There are actually two different words being used that are translated as alms. One of them is eleemosune, which is mercy, and the other one is dikaiosune, which is justice. So the Greek says when you do justice, when you do mercy. Now, a couple things. One, the verses suggest that that we do those things with our hands. And it also suggests that we do them in secret, right? Let not your left hand know what your right hand is doing, which may flag that there are ritual gestures taught with your hands here, okay? Maybe. By the way, stage directions. If at some point God, the Lord, is going to become an actor, where does he appear to be now, at this moment in the ordinance? He's off stage. And the only place that can really be is it suggests he's back here behind the curtain. He sees in secret, right? Suggests he's back there, and if you're doing this and you see the veil up there, you know, you maybe it's above you, and this is where God is. You're being warned that God is seeing your acts of justice and mercy. All right, Kathy, verses 5 through 8, if you would.
And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut the door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly.
Okay. When thou prayest. What kind of prayers is this instruction for?
Individual prayers?
Yeah, individuals. When thou is you, one person. When you pray. Hey, pray in private, right? And this is how you do it. All right, Matt, verses 9 to 13.
9 to 13. After this manner, therefore, pray ye.
Oh, pray who?
Ye, so.
That's more than one person. Okay, let's keep going.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Awesome. So after some teachings about justice and mercy, maybe some hand gestures, here's how you pray. Let's pray together. Now there's a terrible translation in this prayer. And it's the word daily. Okay? The word that gets translated as daily in Greek is epiousios. You know what epi is, right? That's like your epidermis. It's on top. Ousios is the participle of the verb to be, and it means the existent, the being. Epiousios means on the existent one. This is the only time it appears in the New Testament. Daily is a guess, and the guess is, hey, this is the existent day. The bread upon the existent day is the daily bread. I have a better guess, especially in light of what comes shortly after this, okay? The name of the Lord, Yahweh, is closely connected to the verb to be. So that it's this is what I am that I am, ehye asher eshe, right? Yahweh is thought to mean something like the one who causes to be, or the existent one. So this is not your daily bread. What you are asking for is the bread of Yahweh, the bread that Yahweh is in, or the bread that's upon him, that's closely connected to the Lord.
So, the sacrament isn't just representing Christ, it's an invitation to feast at the table of the Father and the Son.
We are so going there. Yes. Okay. That's in this chapter. We're going to get there. Okay. All right. Verses. But hey, Julie, you're up. Verses 16. Verses 14 and 15 first.
For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you forgive not men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses.
So we've had moral teachings around marriage, divorce, and chastity, around loving your enemy. Now this, I think, maybe is a teaching around forgiveness. And then verses 16 through 18.
Moreover, when you fast, be not as the hypocrites of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thy head, and wash thy face, that thou appearest. That thou appear not to men unto to fast, but unto thy Father which is in secret. And thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly.
So yeah, and so as a stage direction, God appears to still be in secret behind the veil here, right? A teaching about fasting and washing and anointing. Maybe this means that this is a moment where one was washed and anointed. I don't know. Or maybe this is some kind of teaching about explanation of those practices that you maybe did previously. Verses 19 to 24, Will, if you would.
Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The light of the body is the eye, and if therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon.
So here's another moral teaching, maybe a covenant, right? The moral teaching is, hey, you can either put your heart on treasures on earth or on heavenly treasures. One or the other, can't be both. You can either serve mammon or you can serve God, right? You're all in on God and heaven or you're not, right? That's the moral teaching here. May be received by oath. All right, Doug, 25 through 32. Now, so we've had moral teaching. I think now we're going to get into some more action. Some stuff happens here.
Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor yet for your body, what you shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment? Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them, and ye, are ye not much better than they? Which of ye by taking thought can add 1 cubit unto his stature? And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wherefore, if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or where shall we be clothed? For all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things.
So don't worry about what to eat or drink or wear, because why? Well, that's the previous one. It says God will feed you, right? God will feed you. God will give you drink. God will give you clothes. Now, if this is the description of an ordinance, this suggests, Julie, that God, who we've heard is in secret watching, now appears. And the purpose for which he appears is to have a feast with you, okay, and to clothe you. Now, just kind of a footnote. I said back in here that I thought that there was a reference to Moses suggesting that Moses is maybe the role of the priest who is initiating people in room 1. Similarly, this might be a reference to Elijah. Birds of the air being fed. That's not quite the Elijah story. Elijah is fed by the birds of the air. Ravens bring him to eat during the drought. Another reason why I think the sequence is Moses and Elijah is back to that Zechariah story, right? Because in Luke 1, Zechariah goes in and he sees the angel, and I've put this guy over here quite deliberately. He is standing to the right of the incense altar. And what is it that the angel Gabriel talks to Zechariah about? He's going to have a son, and what's the son's role going to be? He's going to go before the Lord. He's going to fulfill the mission of Elias, right? And the Lord is described as the dawn, the day spring from on high, which suggests the connection between John the Baptist and Elias, Elijah, and suggests the imagery of the veil opening and light coming down from on high to people who are standing here, right? So those are some of the reasons why I think this is sort of Elijah has been, a person in the role of Elijah or Elias has been taking you forward. Now, I want to jump out of Matthew 6 for a few minutes because I want to look at some other passages that I think touch on this, because this scene I think is shown in other places. So we're to will, is that right? Yes.
If we're going to take a break.
Oh, it's break time?
It might be good to do it now.
Let's do it. Let's take a break.
Okay?
That sounds great. I appreciate you. Oh, this is great timing. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and talk about Melchizedek. All right.